If you were arrested for domestic violence, and especially if it is your very first time being arrested, you may be starting to see that the way that you would think that things go, the way that you think that the police would build a case or make a decision as to whether to make an arrest is not always how they go. The criminal justice system in California is not intuitive, and the way to approach a domestic violence case is not intuitive. And I see the same misconceptions again and again from my clients. This is the first in a series of 7 videos in which I go through these common misconceptions that a lot of people have when they are first arrested for domestic violence, especially if it is their first arrest, and clearing them up. Because if you go forward with your case with a misunderstanding of how things go, it can really screw you over. My name is Veronica. I'm a domestic violence defense attorney here in California, and I help people put their cases behind them so that they can enjoy their lives and their freedom. I'm also the creator of a course called Defeat the DVRO, in which I teach you from start to finish everything you need to know to win your restraining order hearing. Many times when you are arrested for domestic violence, if the victim is not on your side, if the victim does want the case to go forward, the police will sort of educate them and teach them, hey, you can go down to the courthouse and get a restraining order. Now all of a sudden you are slapped with a restraining order kicking you out of your house, can't see your kids in some cases. It can be really bad and also really expensive. You just paid for bail. You hopefully are paying for a criminal defense attorney, and now you have this restraining order that you have to fight against. So I created a course teaching you everything you need to know to represent yourself and win if you do find yourself in that situation, and you can get your free class down below. Okay, so let's jump right in. The first misconception is that going to domestic violence classes is a sign of guilt. Now, intuitively, this makes sense. Like, if I didn't do anything wrong, if I'm not guilty of domestic violence, why in the world would I go and take domestic violence classes? If I start going, then it makes it seem like I have a problem with domestic violence, right? In the regular world, of course, that probably does make sense. I mean, if you have a friend who tells you that, sorry, I can't go to dinner tonight because I have to go to my domestic violence class to learn how to not do domestic violence, you are probably thinking, I guess my friend has a problem with domestic violence, right? I mean, that's normal to think, but that is the opposite of how it is in criminal cases in the state of California. If you start taking domestic violence classes, especially if you take them early, like you get arrested, you bond out, and then you just start taking domestic violence classes, how that is interpreted by the prosecution is generally that you are somebody who is responsible, who is proactive. It's not that you did something wrong. Like, first of all, they know that an attorney is recommending for you to go to these classes, and you are complying with that, which not everyone does. Not everyone who is recommended to go to these classes goes. So you're someone who is responsible, and you're taking this seriously. A lot of people in the criminal justice system, not the first-time offenders, but the repeat customers, the people who keep coming back, they don't really mind that they are, maybe on probation. They don't really mind that they have criminal history. They don't mind that they may spend a night or two in jail. That is okay with them. And those are the people that you do see back again and again in the system. And the prosecution knows that. The courts know that. Everybody who's involved understands that. But if you can stand out because you are willing to be proactive, be responsible, and you can show that you are horrified by this situation. Maybe you did absolutely nothing wrong. Maybe you were covering for your partner and you took responsibility to save them from potentially losing their job or immigration issues, or maybe they do have a record and so the penalties might be worse for them. Or if maybe a neighbor called the cops and the cops said, sorry, we have to arrest one of you, that's our policy, even though both of you said nothing happened. What you're showing them is at least you never want to be in the situation of being arrested again. So maybe the neighbor called the cops and the two of you just had a loud argument. Okay, well, you want to make sure that you never have an argument loud enough again that a neighbor calls the cops like that. You want to make sure that you are never in a position where you are covering for your partner and then you end up getting arrested and potentially facing all of these consequences here. So what I recommend to my clients is that you start domestic violence classes right away, especially if it's your first time being arrested and you have not been to court yet. You have a real shot of getting the prosecution to drop the case ahead of time. And what you want to do to maximize those chances are go to classes, get letters of recommendation and character letters from your family and friends, defense and have your attorney explain to the prosecution all of the good things about you, all of the things that you stand to lose, so that when the prosecution is making this decision, are we actually going to file charges or not? Because when you get arrested and you get a court date, they have not yet filed charges, they're much more likely to drop it. Okay, so let's go through an example here to really illustrate this. So we have Mike. Mike is a first-time arrestee, and he is terrified of losing his job over a false domestic violence accusation. The stigma and the potential of jail time and of having a criminal record that could potentially affect his future is weighing really heavily on him. He hires an attorney, and the attorney tells him, hey, go to these domestic violence classes, or sometimes it's even go to individual therapy, go to anger management. His attorney makes these recommendations, and his attorney explains why and explains it's not an admission of guilt, but it doesn't feel right to him. He knows that he didn't do anything wrong. Did you ever read those Choose Your Own Adventure books? They had them for Goosebumps. I don't know if the kids still read them, but let's do a Choose Your Own Adventure here. Choice number 1. This just is not sitting right with Mike. So Mike decides, he's not going to take these classes. He does get the character letters. He does have his attorney contact the prosecution and explain the good things about him. But when the prosecution is going through the cases and deciding which ones they are going to drop before court and which ones they are going to file, they look at the information that Mike's attorney submitted, and then they look at all the other packets that other attorneys, maybe even Mike's attorney, submitted for other people. And they think, what's with this guy? Why wouldn't he have taken these classes? He has an attorney. Surely he knows that he could be taking them. You know what? This guy's stubborn. I don't really know how to feel about this case, so why don't we just file it and Mike can sort it out later. He can go to trial if he wants to. And so the prosecution files the case against Mike. Now, them filing it doesn't mean that Mike loses, but now he has to go to court and fight the case instead of having it potentially dropped before court. So that's choice number 1. Choice number 2 in this Choose Your Own Adventure is that Mike listens to his attorney. It still doesn't feel right, but he overcomes his fear, he trusts his attorney, and he does take the classes. He takes 1 class per week. He doesn't have a lot of free time because he is working a lot. He's even picking up some extra hours because of how expensive this whole thing has been. But he does an online class. His attorney submits proof in addition to everything else. He ends up doing 16 hours of this online domestic violence class before court. His attorney submits that with all of his great character letters, explains all of the good things about him, the hardships that he's experienced, how hard he's worked to get his job, and how much he stands to lose. And ultimately, the prosecution decides, you know what? Let's give this guy a second chance. And they decide to drop the whole case before court. So that is how important taking these classes is. It can be literally the difference between the prosecution dropping the charges before court and deciding to go ahead and file charges against you. It doesn't make you look bad. It doesn't make you look guilty. It makes you look good. I hope that you found this video helpful. And if you did find the video helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.